Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the final NATS chat of the 2021 season, which has been quite a year this year for all of us, not just NATS chat events. And I'm Kari Reagan, the moderator, and I would like to begin by thanking Inside View Press for sponsoring our NATS chats, and also to thank my esteemed guests who are here with me tonight, Kelly Garner, Edrie Means Weekly, Jordyn Day Palmer, and Jaron LeGrair. Thank you for joining me.
Absolutely.
Thank you for having us.
It's going to be a great conversation to bring the year to a close. So I'm really eager to see how tonight evolves. Let's begin. First of all, but instead of reading your bios, I'll tell everybody that in the chat box, you will see each one of their websites. So please feel free to go and view the websites and get to know these wonderful teachers and singers a bit more if you're not already familiar with them. And but I would like to begin with just a little beyond the bio. So Kelly, would you like to begin and just share with us something that we wouldn't read or wouldn't know about you by reading your bio?
Oh, okay. That's always a good question. Well, as it happens, we just had a graduation yesterday, and one of the speaker talked about zigs and zags of life. That's just off the top of my head. And I began as a math ed graduate from Auburn University and planned to go into math and did my internship and really just hated it. I mean, you know, nothing against it, but it was just not creative enough. And I had been a vocal performance major at Auburn while I was a math and dropped that. So it's like the zigs and zags of life. You never know what's going to happen. And then when I realized it was not the right subject, I then went to Belmont and started that whole process, education and such. But, you know, I think a lot of people, you really have to find what your true passion is. Mm. And I went through several things like that, did an entire degree, undergraduate degree, and then had to do a whole nother one to start the other. But it was 2 year because I had all the undergrad done, but or the core was already done. So, you know, I would encourage anybody to just, no matter what it takes, you have to find what your true passion is. And even as teachers, that's one thing that I try to do with my students every day is, okay, what do you really want to do? I see that question come up, you know, like, well, do I really want to do this? I just don't know. Mom and dad want me to do medicine. And I'm like, what do you think that you could lay your head on your pillow every single night and be completely happy for the rest of your life? And they're like, oh, well, I really love music and I want to sing, you know. And so I'm like, well, then you figured it out, you know. I've spent 30 years doing it and never worked in anything else, and very thankful for it. And so, you know, it's that's just part of my little story that lots of people don't know, that I kind of started. I had a mother and a grandmother that were math teachers, so that maybe tells you a little bit about it. And down in Alabama, clearly you can hear that I'm an Alabama girl. But that's, you know, that's part of my story that some people might not know, because, you know, it took me doing an entire undergraduate degree and going and doing an internship and doing geometry and algebra problems for the entire day, and to realize, you know what, no, this is not my passion. It is for some people. It was for my mother, but my grandmother, but music was my passion and singing was my passion. And so it took me going through that and going home then and crying every night because I wasn't doing what I really loved. And that, you know, that's a story that I talk about with recruits. I say, you know, you've got to find your passion. And if that passion is music, then go for it.
I love
don't stop. Don't stop.
Such an important message, Kelly. I think it's really important. Edrie, how about for you? You're beyond the bio. What would
beyond the bio? Oh my goodness. Well, my journey started out in with a BME. I wanted to be a choral director or at least teach voice in some capacity, and went off to college to do that. And it wasn't until getting involved in some of the productions, and then also towards the end of my junior year, Wolf Trap Opera had called and wanted me to be a part of their summer program, that my life took a different route. And so I feel in a lot of ways, my voice led me in certain directions throughout my life. But always I had that teaching aspect in the back. You know, I always wanted to return to that degree in some capacity. What really was fortunate for me is that I had a fabulous teacher that was able to guide me vocally and allowed me to explore my voice and explore different vocal sounds and maintain a good, healthy vocal function while doing so. And so at the time when I was still doing opera, I was also doing musical theater and auditioning and performing during that time in both genres. So it was, I never thought of it like as a technique, so to speak. And I taught myself a lot about laryngeal flexibility, which we now know is a thing, but back then I didn't know that. And so, I mean, my backstory with all of this really is that my voice was leading me in these different directions. And I just enjoyed doing it and doing different styles, and didn't really think of it as, you know, one technique versus another technique, but just as this is how my voice is functioning at this time in this particular style. And I think that helped me to be the performer that I ended up being in the both classical world and the musical theater world. So for me, I set out to do choral directing or choral conducting, if you will, and ended up being in Houston Grand Opera Studio, where I pursued my master's in vocal performance, and then went off to perform for a while and ended up teaching after an automobile accident that caused a spinal injury. So life has its turns and guides you in different directions. And I think sometimes it's, you know, you grasp those opportunities and learning opportunities. And it really brought me into a more research part of that I never thought would happen. And meeting you, Kari, and a lot of my colleagues, after performing for many years. And since then, I've done some performing, and but basically, you know, getting more into the research and the scientific aspects of vocal function and how we teach and how we learn.
Love that. Thank you, Edrie. Jordyn, take it away, beyond the bio.
I guess I will go also to my before college story, and just that I was an instrumentalist in high school primarily, and my parents were like, oh, you should not go to school for music, because why would you do that? You're not gonna make any money and all this stuff. But lucky for them, I was a very social creature in high school and wasn't gonna be good enough to get into university anyway. So I had to go to community college. And I went to community college with like, well, I'm gonna do music. And for some reason in my brain, I was like, the most logical path is for me to play piano. I don't know why I thought that. I was not a good piano player, but I did. And so I was taking piano at this community college, and I cried like every day. I hated it so much. And I was down in the practice room practicing for hours, and I was sick of it. And so I decided to start playing a pop song. I was playing a song by Jewel, and I was playing on the piano, and I was singing along with it, and I hear this knock on the window, and I turn around, and it's the professor of the choir program, and he was just like, hey, why aren't you in choir? And I was like, why? I'm not a good singer. It's not the career for me. I'm so sorry. He's like, well, you're gonna come audition, and I'll see you on Monday. And I just was like, okay, I guess this is what I'm doing. And I told myself this whole story about I'm not going to get in. He was just doing that because he needs numbers, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, and so I ended up getting in, and then I was like, maybe I can do this, and kind of set myself down this path of, well, I'm just going to make it happen, and I'm going to struggle my way through. And I felt really far behind the rest of my classmates. I had taken voice lessons my entire life, but never seriously. You know, I just sang whatever I wanted to sing and didn't listen to my teacher. And anyway, it just started me down this path, and here I am, you know, after 10 years after college, and just feel lucky that this is the path I ended up on. And I'm so thankful, because I do wake up every day and think, wow, what a life that I get to live, that I love what I do. And there are always going to be bad days. We've all had those days where we're like, why am I teaching? This is so hard. But at the end of the day, you know, 99% of it is wonderful and beautiful. And I get to do things like this, and I also get to sing. And there's nothing better. So,
Wow,
yeah.
I love that, Jordyn. Thank you. I did not know that part of your story. I can't believe that. Jaron, to fill us in.
I was thinking about this question when you asked it, and so I tell the story a lot when I'm sharing my story, I should say. You know, I grew up singing in church and grew up singing my whole life, and always had the high voice and everything. But when I got 18, I said, I've sung enough. I have enough experience. I don't need anybody to tell me how to sing anymore. Like, you know, I feel like I arrived at age 18, graduated high school. So, you know, so that was me. I was always a hard-headed kid like that. Like, so, you know, I majored in graphic design in college at first, actually. I was talking to my brother last night about this, actually. Microsoft had like Corel and Paint, those software things. I would make banners and all this type of stuff. And so I've always been very visually creative. So I even make my own graphics for all my studio stuff, my web stuff. So people don't know that about me, but I actually thought about going into graphic design. And then I majored in psychology for like 24 hours. I went to one class and I said, oh, this is for me. I know now. So I just walked out, and, you know, so that's really the backstory. You know, I've taken classes in sign language. People don't know that either. But the whole me getting into teaching was just one day I remember singing in a hallway after I decided to go for music. And I just remember seeing a professor walk by me, and just kind of dawned on me, nothing deep, nothing profound, just dawned on me like, I didn't teach people to sing. Like, that's what they do. Wow. I said, maybe I could do that. And it was really just a simple thought on a bench one day at school, and the rest become history, you know. And so yeah, I think if I didn't do voice teaching, although I don't see myself doing anything else, but if in the event that I didn't, I would probably be a graphic designer or even architect, something like that, something visual. I've always been into that kind of stuff. So that's a little bit about my artistic side that people don't, you know about besides the music. So.
Oh, thank you for sharing, all of you. I really enjoyed hearing everyone's Beyond the Bio. So we're here tonight to talk about contemporary vocal styles, right? And all that involves. We won't cover all of it tonight, but let's dive in a little bit and start the conversation. I think I'd like to begin with just talking about what are you passionate about when you hear our profession of voice teachers and you see Facebook posts talking about contemporary vocal styles, and what gets you passionate, you know, what do you want to lead with? So Jordyn, why don't you dive in with us?
All right. I would say the thing I am most passionate about right now is that every voice, every sound, every noise that we're going to make as popular singers, pop singers, R&B singers, jazz, whatever, has a place in CCM. And, you know, obviously we could talk for hours about noises that people make and how efficient they are and these kinds of things. But I think what it comes down to is what does a singer want to sound like? What inspires them? What sounds and noises make them happy and help them tell this story? And then how can I or we as voice teachers hear that sound and give it life and give it efficiency and help them to achieve these things? And so often I'll see people say things like, well, this person's voice is not good, or this voice is too this, or this voice is not enough this. And at the end of the day, it's really that there's not a one size fits all sound for well, most music, I believe, but especially in pop, and I'm gonna go with pop music. That's what I know best, and R&B. But what does that even mean? You know, it's such a subjective thing to hear that a voice isn't good or is, you know, doesn't fit this narrative, because really there are so many voices that are successful and are telling stories, and just because maybe I don't love the sound doesn't mean it doesn't have a place, or if I love that sound and somebody else doesn't that you know, there's no value in that. It's such a subjective thing to put a label on. And anyways, that's what I'm passionate about. Let's make everybody who wants to make sounds, let's let them, and let us do our job, which is to hear them and help them be as efficient as possible.
I love that, Jordyn. I think that is so true. One of the things I've loved about learning contemporary vocal styles is that there are many colors like you talk about. And when you're classically trained like I was, you're so busy for so many years looking for that perfect efficiency and that chiaro oscuro. And there's one road that leads to Rome for every singer, right? It becomes this thing to achieve. And there's something liberating about contemporary vocal styles where you get to just explore the full range of vocal colors. And I think that's so liberating. Who else would like to respond to specifically what Jordyn's talking about? I'm sure that resonates with others.
I'll chime in. So I mean, I want to echo what she's saying and make my points kind of short, but just kind of echoing what Jordyn profoundly said so well. And I think for me, it's not only that, but adding on to that is, you know, furthering the science and figuring out how this stuff works. You know, just developing it and furthering it. There's stuff, so many things are being developed. You know, we have you have all these history makers sitting in the room right now. You know, so it's already been being developed, but it's just furthering it along. You know, making it more accessible to even more people. And I think the point how social media even can spread the word so much farther now than it used to. You know, so this knowledge can be attained by so many other people by just clicking the right profile or clicking the right video on YouTube, and and everybody has their theories of what's right or what's what they feel is correct in right terms, but it's just the whole the magic of the science of it all. I think for me is really the one thing I'm passionate about. Just seeing it progress and seeing research happen, seeing presentations, seeing articles, seeing different types of teachers, just that whole thing. I think it's super cool.
I love that.
Absolutely.
Edrie, what are your thoughts?
Oh my goodness. I mean, everything I agree with what they're both have already said. But I mean, looking at that, I mean, we're speaking about laryngeal flexibility across the board and making all sorts of sounds, whether they're ugly or beautiful or in between. And in order to be able to do that and facilitate those movements, you're going to have laryngeal flexibility and learn, a little bit more healthy vocal function and how we're executing a lot of these different sounds that we're making, so that we don't hurt ourselves, and that it's coming from a point like Jaron said, that based on science and starting at the level of the folds and then working it up through the vocal tract, shaping the vocal tract, doing vowel shaping, distorting the vowel, along with vocal stylisms, which is what I'm passionate about, and I think we'll get to that at some point in here. But there's so many sounds that our voice makes, and we need to embrace all of them. And some of them are gorgeous, beautiful sounds, and where others are just not, pleasant to the ear for some. But for others, it could be everything that they want to listen to all day, all night. And we need to be able to embrace that uniqueness in each individual.
Great. I love that. And Kelly, how about you when we're talking about colors?
Well, colors, I think a lot about the voice because I came through learning, well, as a child, I was trying to sing and I guess belt a little bit as a 6 and 7-year-old, not doing it the right way. Going through some college experiences, probably still not singing correctly. Finally got to Belmont, and Margie Halbert fixed the voice and worked with me quite a bit. And such great classical technique. And then basically I hopped into the studio. That's kind of the world that I jumped into. And I, as opposed to some, I mean, so many of you have done so much research. I really sat in that studio sometimes 12 hours a day doing long projects and listened to other singers that were on the mic say things to me like, hey girls, and they were much older than me. I was one of those, I got lucky. I was a sub for a couple of sessions, and but a friend of mine, Mary George, who sang with the Bev Darnell Singers for many years, she was on the soprano mic, and sometimes I would sub for Bev, and she would say, hey girls, let's mix that. Well, that was the first time I had ever heard the word mix. And I suddenly realized where she was placing the sound. I mean, I had come out of just getting my voice fixed, so to speak, in the classical world and singing all kind of opera literature and such. And she said, we got to mix it. And I had to suddenly learn on the spot. You know, I was getting paid for it. And I thought, whoo, I've got to figure out what she's talking about. And so part of the education for me was using my ears and listening to how she was placed, where she was putting the voice. She was bringing it forward, and she was passing across the bridge well, nicely, and it was probably because it was in a place. And so that style, I guess I just kind of got hit in the face with that style, and had to figure out how to do it quickly by ear, and not necessarily by somebody just teaching me exactly how to do it. And so my thoughts, and we'll probably get into this more at some point, but I think that basically there's really only one healthy technique. There's lots of styles, and there's lots of things you can study, and lots of people teach it different ways, of course, but if you want to stay healthy, there's you can do that within all the styles. The styles are just, I loved what Edrie said about different shapes, and we talk a lot about vowel modification for certain things, especially in belt. If they don't modify the vowels, they'll start to hurt themselves. And so for instance, an E, you've got to sing that through an O. It doesn't matter if it's belt or what, you've got to open that vowel up. So I loved what I heard there, Edrie.
Jordyn, we have a question from Dan that I'll ask of you. He
Okay.
said, Dan Mitten says, if we frame Jordyn's idea from a positive perspective, what quality or skill would you say most contemporary voices or artists have in common? Is there a common thread between expressive singers in the contemporary vocal styles?
This is like, this could open up a whole can of worms, I think. Because I was like, oh, I don't know. The one thing I would say, I'm going to say this in general terms, just kind of jumping off point of what everybody else had said, which is, I think flexibility, and I'm not even going to refer to pedagogy in this term. I'm just going to say flexibility and an ability to make sounds. I think that's a very broad term, but as far as we could jump off of vowel modification and not even knowing it from, again, not even talking about it from a technique place, but let's just talk about it from a storytelling place. Is if you hear somebody singing something and they're so passionate, I'm going to take Whitney Houston for example, and you watch her mouth move and the shapes that she makes, or was RIP was making at the time, the sounds that she was making were so flexible, right? She wasn't attached to one vowel that made this E, right, or made an O. It was like emotion bleeding out of her through vowels, right? Vowel flexibility. And I also think within that too, I'm going to bring up agility, and I know that's a big thing for a lot of folks. But the more agile you are as a singer, you have more access to these sounds. So whether that is registration, agility, or just speed, or whatever it might be, yeah, I don't know if that's really going to answer that question very well, because that kind of is just so broad. But yeah, it's flexibility to just know your instrument so well that you can make the sounds that you are called to make at that moment. That's very spiritual, but I think a lot of musical is spiritual. So yes, hopefully that answers.
That's a brilliant answer. One skill or quality, you know, flexibility. Right. That's brilliant. Anybody else want to respond specifically to Dan's question about what quality or skill would you say?
I would have to.
Whoa, sorry.
Oh no, Edrie, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that a lot of this is coming from an emotional and expressive place that doesn't seem to be unified across the board. You really cannot, you have got to be authentic to the sound, to your sound. I mean, you're not wanting to be, and I know, I know a lot of you know my Julie Andrews impersonation, but you're not wanting, you know, we already have Julie Andrews. We already have, you know, James Brown and Mariah Carey, and the uniqueness of their voices. You know, we're looking for the uniqueness of your voice, and they may be just looking for you and the expression that you bring to it through being able to have this flexibility, laryngeal flexibility, if you will, and also the flexibility of being able to pull from your palette of sounds. But again, it's all through individual expression. And so having it connected from, you know, across the board from styles to style, even with different vocal stylisms, those will transfer to other styles, like a pop stylism will transfer maybe into a country song, but it may be treated a little bit differently. So, I mean, these are all things that it's a broad question.
It is a broad question.
But you know, you have to look at the individual, because it's not a cookie cutter shape.
Right. I was just going to add, when I heard Jordyn mention the word agility, the word that came to mind for me was freedom in the voice. And I think we all can think of different times with different singers that we've worked with that all of a sudden we think, oh, now you found your freedom in the voice. And the agility of the voice just comes to life. And I've even found, whether it be R&B, I mean, we might be talking, I'm sure we may mention riffs at some point down the road, but whether it be, because I just think of that when I think agility, whether it be riffs or whatever it might be, the minute that singer can find that agility in the voice, they can put that across any style they want to. I mean, whether it be classical or R&B or country or whatever. But I would like to, you know, just bring that up, that's so important once you find that freedom.
Well, and that's all about flexibility. And if you've got too much weight in the voice, you're not going to be able to have that flexibility. And, you know, in speaking about riffs, it's, you know, I've often told my own clients that they need to back off and lighten up.
Exactly.
And, you know, work the agility into their voice, even if it's just triplet patterns down, you know, anything that, you know, I used to tell some of my college students, you know, pick up a Baroque aria and learn some of, you know, the ornamentation, because a lot of that, again, when you're looking at a lot of the nuances, the added notes that are brought into licks and riffs, a lot of them are patterns that we have in the Baroque ornamentation. And so you can pull those out and start, you know, training them and maybe put them into a blues note scale or a pentatonic scale just to get that worked into their voice. But also, you know, again, the flexibility, and starting with like a triplet pattern is really hard for a lot of belters.
That's so great, because our one of our next questions, I think you somewhat have answered, but let me lead it. Seth Lowry says, I love the idea of having one healthy technique, but how would you describe that technique? What is foundational and what is style specific? I think a lot of folks have drawn the line in different places over the years. I think you were alluding to some of that, but would you like to expand with that as a point of reference? And that can be anyone.
Well, Jaron,
Mhm.
I'll just go ahead and say that kicks me right into the space of belting because I work with so many belters, and I have tried my best to, as I say, it needs to be healthy technique. It needs to be foundational by the breath, thrown with the breath, relax the throat, relax the larynx, all those things, and then find the placement, get that jaw released, find the placement that will allow you to throw that note to that place. And if you haven't found that freedom and agility and Edrie, all those things that you're talking about, then don't hurt yourself. Come off the gas. I have even talked with some of my students a little bit when it comes to belting about, okay, can you sing that? Can you kind of belt that at about a 50% level? And they will try, they're like, oh no, I can't do that unless I just completely throw it to the wall. I'm like, don't ever throw the voice to the wall. Like, come back about at least 20% and see if you can still do it, because if you can, you're finding your space, you're finding that placement for it. So that's one thing that I've thought of. Jaron, did you have something in mind?
Well, yeah, I was listening to the story about the Baroque styles and the thing. It's funny. I was brought to a story when I was learning Handel's Messiah stuff. Sidebar, I've never been hired to do the Handel's Messiah material ever in my life, and I'm waiting for the day for that to happen. but I was learning the material just because I wanted to learn, and I was in between undergrad and grad school, and I was learning the tenor material because I was a tenor at the time, and I remember taking half-hour lessons, and the whole half hour was melismas. He would have me do scales, 9-tone, 13-tone, jumps, leaps, So my voice wasn't, I could move my voice to do runs, but I couldn't do them in the way of the Baroque style. And so I remember after so many months, I started singing a little bit of the Handel's, Every Valley, that kind of stuff. And I was able to move through the songs. And so, I take some of that same very thing when I teach people how to do runs, because sometimes it's not always the agility in terms of the physicality, it's the agility here. How I don't know how to match my voice in terms of the theory to the run. I don't know how to put my voice in the scales, so sometimes the agility is not just the physical, but it's also the hearing, neurological, mental, oral part, so when I teach you how to do runs, what I try to not do is make them sound like me, because my ear is one way, but they may have a different ear that needs to be developed. But a lot of that is risk taking, that they don't want to take risks. They're like, it's too out there, it's too uncomfortable, so what I often do is just like play different jazz chords, I'll start major chords and I'll go with jazz chords later on, and I'll say, okay, this is point A and point B. Find your way from point A to point B, whether it's going down or going up. I was like, so let yourself mess up, so as you mess up and kind of get it in your system, you'll start to get more comfortable. I said a lot of it though is just comfortability and, things like that, so I think that there are different ways to achieve the same thing. I use my experience from learning those melismas and I apply it to my CCM teaching, but I was learning how to articulate them better when I was doing the classical stuff, because I want to learn the Handel's Messiah material. And so I think like under the one part of the question was the line is drawn different places, different people. I think that's very true, because I think the lines can get muddy in terms of what is technique, what is style. I think it's up for interpretation. I don't think there's a right or wrong answer necessarily. I just think it's more so, what works for your teaching, what for your style, works for your clients or students, and, what works for, your environment. I think going from there, leaving off of that, it's just kind of the best way, to do it. So I think, I'm all about trying new things and hoping for the best. I tell my students all the time, I said, I'm not the end all be all, I'm learning just like you. I see we can learn together today, so I'm not saying I'm the end all be all. What I say goes, because what I found, honestly, when I started teaching, I want everybody to sound like me. So when I was teaching, I'm like, everybody do belt. Let's just belt and go high, and let's just, and I'm like, everybody's not that. I have to, so as I gained experience of just working with people, understanding how people think, how people are, I had to say, Jaron, everybody's not Jaron. That'd be a boring word if everybody sounded like you. Everybody sound like themselves. So in that, I feel like the stylistic things and the technical things can even vary between person to person, even if you're going to go down that route. So.
We have a specific question, Edrie, maybe for you, since I think you brought up the agility. Do you find that darkening the vowel aids agility? It's a very, somebody asked that very
Well, you
specific.
can darken and you can brighten the vowel. I mean, those are stylistic choices and sound choices, obviously. Could I answer a little bit of the question before? Is that possible? Many years ago, I dropped the word technique. I just dropped it because singing in both areas for me changed the word technique for me, because it was more about how my voice was functioning, how my breath was functioning, how the musculature was functioning. So for me, it's all about vocal function versus technique. And if we can all, I mean, I would love to have a euphoria world of, all of us calling it vocal function and just talking about how our voice is working, how the muscles are working, how the cricothyroid muscle is interacting with the thyroid, because after all, aren't we in a mix all the time? I mean, really? You can only decide how much of what muscle is being used if you do the EMG. If you've done an EMG, then they can tell you exactly the percentage of that. Wendy told me this a long, long time ago, Wendy LeBourne, because I said, well, I feel like I'm 50-50 when I'm in my mix. I'm 50-50. And she said, you can't say that. You cannot say that. Of course, I'm talking to a voice scientist. And so I learned early on that, that it was more what was going on functionally with all of the mechanism, so that we don't get so wrapped up into pop technique, jazz technique, classical technique, etc. As far as the classical technique that I was taught in college as well as in high school, I felt that it did aid in how I trained myself to sing these other styles because of how I used the breath. With the breath, that was one of the first things that I noticed. I was belting and I felt the same subglottic air pressure on my belt notes that I felt with my high fortissimo classical notes. So all of a sudden there was some kind of, togetherness there that made sense to me from what I had been taught. Where do we go from there? Well, let's see how this functions when I make this sound. Because I mean, honestly, with my voice teacher, who was a wonderful voice teacher and has remained a mentor all my life, she allowed me to experience all these different sounds and would question, what do you feel at this time? Very kinesthetic. I'm a kinesthetic person and also an oral person. I think that's another thing that we need to really focus on, that each individual person has a different learning system that they use. Not everybody is kinesthetic, and that a lot of what we say, do you feel this? Do you feel this? Well, what does it sound like to you? Well, some people aren't oral learners, but I'll tell you what, the best riffers that I've come across in my teaching have all been really great oral learners. Interesting. Anyway, I rambled on, but I mean, I just wanted to make that point that I think that that we've gone more into functionality and muscle function instead of, and vocal function instead of just technique, so to speak. My 2 cents.
Love it.
Well, yeah.
I love that.
I was just going to say, I agree with that completely. I love those ideas. And one thing that I'm seeing in the questions is about the connectivity, which I think goes along with that. It's really that function of the voice and connectivity, top to bottom, right?
Absolutely. The vocal fold closure, that it's different. It's going to be thicker if we're in mode 1, which is, chest register or thyroid retinoid muscle dominant. It's going to be thinner if we're in mode 2, head register or cricothyroid dominant. So, I mean, this is, stuff that we learn, and everything happens right there at the level of the folds. and then is supported through that transglottal airflow or the subglottic air pressure that we have. You know, how much air is coming through? Is it being too pressed? I mean, we start there. Where is the tension? Where are we feeling the tension? Is it lying in the body? Is it in the throat? Is it in the tongue? Is it in the jaw? Those mean girls, the tongue and the jaw, I call them the mean girls because they usually are together working their magic.
And we can't underestimate the importance of the resonance strategy.
Oh, absolutely.
Absolutely. Well, Kelly, so what's your passion topic? What's up for you when we get talking about contemporary vocal styles? Is there something that you feel yourself constantly come back to when you talk to other teachers or singers?
Well, I may approach teaching in a few different ways. I'm very kinesthetic, as Edrie was talking about. I talk a lot about, it seems to be that I check the diaphragmatic breathing quite a bit. I do the book, laying on the floor with the book on their stomach all the time. Then it's the jaw. I find that being part of it. And then the placement, I find, and the tongue. It seems like you said, if the jaw is jutting out and they're trying to belt, then the tongue is really high. And I'm like, do you like that Kermit the Frog sound? I mean, you hear what's happening here. It doesn't work. So I find myself trying my best to get them to relax that jaw back, get the tongue down, get the breath working, and then get this, what I like to call a high and flat feeling. It's sometimes I'll draw on a piece of paper a big smiley face with a high flat. I said, if you can feel that very high and flat feeling, get the relaxation. Don't sing it in your throat. So many belters come into me, they're trying to sing it in their throat. And I'm like, you know what? Your powerhouse is in the breath. If you can get a really big full breath and support it, and the core be strong enough to support that out, then get that high flat feeling and throw that note with the tongue down and the jaw relaxed. I find myself saying that more than anything else. And it seems like if they can ever get the connection between those, I think of them as three simple things: getting the placement right in the mask, getting all of this through here to relax, and then get this breath support to be there underneath it.
Great. Anybody want to launch from Kelly's ideas? We can ask it. Let me ask a question. So Matthew has said, can we talk about vocal textures, breathy tones, distortion, sounding younger or older, character voices, etc.? What are your thoughts on these, and what different types of textures can we list? How do you teach these?
Oh my goodness.
That's huge.
A whole other hour.
Whole another hour.
Well, that's all about vocal stylisms and sounds, which I'm passionate about. Again, and I think what we've said over and over is, I mean, I think we can all say that we agree upon having the laryngeal flexibility and being able to alter the interior shape of the vocal tract. But you know, this is so important with a lot of our musical theater singers to be able to be successful and competitive in the industry. They have to be able to sing in multiple styles and be able to make all these different sounds. So they need to cross-train those production muscles and create that flexibility so that they can go in and out and switch back and forth between registers and styles, making interior different shapes, you know, and also changes, allowing those changes in the resonance to serve the style that they are singing. And so these are all, you know, as we know, mechanical and physiological differences, but also vocal acoustic changes like Kari just mentioned, you know. And so in order to do that, you need to definitely have a free body, which, you know, is from head to toe. You know, the face, the tongue, the jaw, the neck muscle stretches, all of those you know, exercises to help keep us more agile overall. and then putting these different sounds in. I've got one exercise that I started with my undergrads a couple years ago called Dory Whale Call. And that was vowel distortion shaping, where if any of you have watched Finding Nemo, you know, Dory knows how to speak whale. And so she does all these different sounds. Does all these different sounds. So I call it my Dory Whale Call. And, you know, it's something.
I do that all the time, Edrie. I have them do the very same thing.
Right. But, you know, I mean, it's learning those different things, learning how to growl. The vocal stylisms, that is an umbrella term that I gave to all those added nuances, pop stylisms, country stylisms, jazz stylisms, whatever you want to call them, tags. But to all of those different vocal add-on nuances that we give to express our songs. And the reason why I've called it vocal stylism is because musical theater character roles can sing or borrow those stylistic things from pop or country R&B to use in their song for emphasis on particular words or actions, like growl. If you think of Stepsister's Lament, and with very little trouble, I could break her little arm, and put a little growl on break. Well, we tend to associate growls with other styles, but here is a character piece in musical theater. So that's why I use that vocal stylisms. But again, the expression and emotion is what we create vocally, you know, through the dynamics and the coloring of the tone and the resonance through these stylistic things like the offsets, the onsets, whether they're aspirated onsets or non-aspirated onsets, meaning aspirated being more breathy in the sound, or it could also be a fry onset, so it has a little noise, or a cry.
Yeah.
There's so many, you know, breathy onsets, creaky, flip onset, fry. I mean, some of the lingo as we
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, like the hitch, like the country hitch. Yeah,
right.
you know, I mean, literally, that's just breaking between the registers, right? I mean,
right, it's a yodel. It's a yodel or a register shift, right?
Yep.
So, I mean, those are, again, some stylistic onsets that are, you know, that can be used, as well as releases, which can be abrupt glottal stops, breathy releases where you, a lot of that in pop music, fall offs, or fall offs, you know, which comes in a lot of country and goes into a yodel or a fry or a shadow vowel. In gospel and R&B, lots of shadow vowels where you have, and I'm telling you, you know, and you have what at the end there, or even
Fall
some
off,
moans and groans. I mean, all these things they come from places of deep expression from deep inside you. And it's really, really hard to teach that if you don't have that emotion in you. But it can, you know, you can work on it and get that done. But there are so many things that you can add to it that gives, you know, a stylistic, like in jazz, I mean, adding the blues note where you have a little bit more bend and you'll have it roll instead of just going straight to the note, roll, and you have a little bit more of a what we call a bent note or a blues note. And I mean, there's so many other things, playing with the vibrato, delayed vibrato, in a lot of, you know, musical theater will initiate vibrato maybe right on the last second of the note. And usually it's because it's releasing some bit of tension in the sound, but it can also be intentional to add color to it, or even like a wave. But anyway, the terminology is different across the board. And, it'd be really good to be able to codify all this, but I think it's going to take a long time in coming because, of course, we don't all speak the same language a lot of the
Well,
time.
and one thing you mentioned, Edrie, was, when the blues note going up, sometimes I'll call it a scoop,
Yeah, well,
scooping
yeah, or
up.
a dip. It could be a dip. Mhm.
Yep.
Jordyn, when you're teaching breathy tones to your pop singers, anything, back to Matthew's question, is there anything specifically, because that's a part of a pop style often. So could you talk about that for a moment?
Yeah, I was just thinking about this idea of like, how do you teach something? And I think it comes down to, is it style informed by technique, or is it technique informed by the style at the moment? And I'll start by saying that I just start teaching these things to my students regardless. Like, it's just one of these things, like, if it's someone who's studying pop or whatever, we'll do it for sure. If it's somebody who's studying something differently, they don't know what they want to sing, then I just start teaching it to them. I call, okay, we're gonna do this little fun thing today, because I think it's important to get these things in. But about breathiness is so interesting. I did hear someone one time say we should call breathiness and not airiness because of the way that the implications behind that. But I guess I honestly just start having people try it, and we try it in their most comfortable, where their voice naturally kind of speaks. And we start from there and just allow the air to flow. And I kind of have them do it sometimes with doing an S versus a Z, right? First, so you feel the airflow on the S. So then you can feel where the flow is starting from. So we can feel if we're just getting like a crash all of a sudden, the vocal folds. We don't want that. So this idea of flow, as opposed to like, just let the air come out of you and just like in a waterfall and then start to sing. I think helping singers understand that they have that kind of control sounds aggressive to me, but you have that ability to control, to go with that, to control that. So yeah, S to a Z, typically, and then and then we go into and whatever that means. I also find that for some, it's easier for them to think about scooping up as opposed to landing on pitch or scooping down, because I think there's a lot of pressure in some folks' minds about landing on a pitch. Like, I have to go from breath to sound, like that's kind of scary, especially for a young singer. So whatever, scoop from someplace, fall from someplace, and land where you will, and just hope that if it works out, it works out, great. If it doesn't work out, we're gonna try again. So I think that would be how I would kind of teach that. It's the same thing with making noises. It depends on your singer. I think some singers walk in and they know how to make these noises, and then you can talk to them about, well, this is how you're making that sound, and isn't that the coolest thing ever? But other students will come in and they'll say things like, well, I heard this singer do this. Billie Eilish sings like this. Great. Well, let's talk about why that is and how you maybe can fit in there. And, we talked about before, we don't need another Billie Eilish. We need this person, whoever they are, to be the answer to the question for the problem that somebody else has. But there's also this idea, and this presentation I'm doing next week, I kind of talk about this, the idea of imitation versus emulation, and that sometimes we imitate because we eventually want to emulate, right, the success or whatever. And imitation, I think, is a really great way to get people to fall into sounds, because they already identify with the singer they're listening to. And so I don't want them to sound like Billie Eilish, but if they love that sound, why do you love that sound? And how do you think they're making it? And then we watch them perform live. Especially live is the best, because then you can actually see what's happening, as opposed to like on a music video where they just look lovely and look like nothing is happening. And so I think that's a really great way to start that conversation about the sounds that are being made.
Great answer. Thanks, Jordyn.
I love that. I'm just going to add one little thing, Kari. Her saying that about watching video. One thing that I've noticed with students that want to approach belt or learn how to do it or whatever, I like for them to go watch how people have belted and done it successfully. Some of those singers, and I mean, a Celine Dion, a Whitney Houston, some of those kinds of people, and watch the shape of their mouth. I'm like, you're not going to see them belting with everything closed down. They've got to open it up and give it some space. And I've seen it really make a difference. That's a great point of video.
Jaron, what are your go-to tips for teaching riffing? And
Yay.
Yeah. Like I said before, I have what I feel like has to be decided on is it a I don't know how to hear it, or I don't know how to do it, or it's a combination of both, or is it maybe like 60-40, so I think that has to be decided first before I even dive into the tips. But some of the tips that I like to do, like I said, I think listening to videos honestly is a great thing to do. Listen to different people. I do this exercise with all my clients pretty much, and I actually just put it on my TikTok. What I said was, I want you to write down up to 5 vocalists you look up to. Okay, whoever those vocalists are, not just people you like, but people you look up to vocally. Then write down things that you like that each of them do. Then take a step further and write down all the commonalities that you feel like they all everything, because our ears tend to go towards certain things for certain reasons. All the singers that I like, though they are different, they are kind of the same, in terms of their their expression and their function and things like that. And so from that, I sometimes use that information. I'll say, okay, so their ear is more so like such and such. So they like hearing that, they may hear runs in that way, but maybe not, so it's kind of a trial and error. So once I get that stuff figured out, I do the hitting a chord and say, try to do this, and sometimes if it's try to do the run. I should specify, try to do the run, try to figure something out from point A to point B. Usually it's 5 to 1, like so to do, or like me to do, like very simple at first. You go very, small margins, and then we may increase the intervals. Maybe I'll do a 2 to 1, maybe like go to 9 to 1, and things like that. But with the jazz chord in the middle, hear the chord, play with the notes in the chord, and come down. But sometimes even if it's just the agility thing, going back to the exercise, just going and making our voice smooth. I have one exercise that I do. Look, I'm trying to look for a piano, and I'm looking at the piano like, ooh. So what happens is I go from one. I go 1, 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I go up to 5, then up to 8. Then I go 8, 7, 8, 8, 7, 6, 7, 8, 8, 7, 6. And I go backwards that way. I'm also doing this with my college and my advanced singers because it's thinking. Running is thinking. Yep. Riffing is thinking. And I think that's another part that people forget. You gotta think. Because I always call singers some of the greatest problem solvers on this planet, because we are constantly, when we're singing a song, we're constantly thinking like, okay, how can I get through? And even if it's all the music's written out, what if something goes wrong? I remember one time I sang at this church in Marysville, Ohio. I'll never forget this. I was singing a song, and I remembered all the notes. It was in Latin, but I cannot remember any of the words. And so I made up Latin syllables and things that sounded Latin to my brain for 6 minutes straight, but I sang all the notes in the right place. It was so crazy. And my accompanist just kind of looked at me and smiled like, wow, he's really doing that, So but it was part of the thinking, like I remember all the notes, but for that moment I can remember the words. So even singing when you don't have music in front of you, or if it's more so improv or kind of just on the spot, you got to think. And so a big part of running and riffing is the mental part. How can I fit my voice orally and theory wise into the music to make it make sense? So that's part of it too. So
Jaron, I love that. I'm just going to jump in because riffing is a big thing in country too. But I love that you mentioned the numbers thing, because I'll do like a little exercise that's 5, 4, 2, 1, 7. So, and even like making them do 5, 4, 3, 5, 4, 2, 1, 2, 4, 5, da 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 da, going to the 7. I'll make them just do that over and over and over again. I said, get in there and do the 5, 4, 3, 1 and go back up until you get it right, until you're in tune, and then I'll make sure they're delineating between the notes a little bit too, because I think that makes sure that the notes are in tune.
Absolutely.
And pitch.
I think it comes
one more thing.
Go ahead.
We all talking now.
Oh, I was just saying that also just learning different patterns in your,
Mhm.
patterns in your voice, but
Mhm.
also for, you were talking about like really getting it into the brain, getting it into the voice, that for some, if they're visual learners, they absolutely need to write it out and,
Yep.
and get that going. And it, again, then you go into the motor learning aspect of it.
Mhm.
And if you learned it wrong and they're not getting that blues or the pentatonic scale or in their
Mhm.
in the chord structure, then it's in their ear in a different way, so it becomes a problem. But I mean, it's approaching it from all different areas, so it's great. That's wonderful.
Absolutely. I just wanted to add one more quick thing with the run thing.
Sure.
Even picking back off of what you just said, there is some people are visual. I used to sometimes, I don't know how this makes sense to me, when I was singing songs and I had to ad lib, sometimes I would write squiggly lines, but for my brain, I knew what that meant. And so I knew what run that was for me in my brain. And I said, okay, that's what I'm supposed to do there. But even going back to, because some people even struggle with the speed of runs
Mhm.
and how
Mhm.
fast or slow can I go? And that
Mhm.
has to do with technique, tremolo, natural, tremolo of the body, vibrato sometimes has to do with it a little bit, depending on the person, the vibrato speed, we can get into all of that stuff. But just all those different aspects, can dictate or can help influence how to run and things like that. So it's just all those things
Jaron,
taken into mind.
Jaron, do you ever talk about, and I think it's interesting for us to exchange ideas, but sometimes I've talked a little bit about landing points, like in
Mm-hmm.
between little riffs of,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
before they go on to the next riff, think
Right.
about and get on a landing point and then go to the next one, so,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and it
Your
is
landing
visual,
points would be great. Yeah.
very much a visual thing. I love that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I
I
was just
love
going
it.
to say about, oh, I'm sorry. I was saying about runs for myself is, there's a lot of theory behind runs. Like there's actual music theory behind the majority of runs are based off of pentatonic scales and blues
Mm-hmm.
scales. And depending on the song, it might be off a natural minor. And I really feel the success for my students, a lot of the success has come in riffs and runs when we've sat down and learned those scales and learned how they relate to each other. And I base my patterns off of that. Always. So, because you can go through almost any run, and most of them fall into the pentatonic scale. So if students know that, it's an easier callback, I think, to know, like, okay, you just got stuck right here. Well, what note did you get stuck on? And where else? What's the escape? Where can you go from there? And I think that that's helpful. But the other part of that too, when you're teaching runs, I think, is sometimes getting rid of the things that can get in the way, which is the vowel shapes and the whatever you're doing with your mouth, whatever is happening, like get rid of all of that and go back to the things that we know that work, slow phonation, whatever it is, put it into something else so that functionally you know that the voice is going to work efficiently or as efficiently as it can in the moment. And then let them learn the riff, then let them explore, right? Because then you're getting two things. You're getting benefit of healthy vocal technique, but you're also building in this skill of looking for runs or whatever it is, building a run, and then put it all together. And I normally put it on nonsense words. I make people sing things that are ridiculous, like baby, over and over again, because it's silly. So it takes them out of that mode of like, I have to sing this awesome thing, whatever it's going to be. And they're just saying some dumb word or whatever it is, fire, and having them fall through it. But I think if we can, for myself, if I can also set up the technique, right? I'm going to use that in my own quotes, the technique, then I feel like when we get out of it and I let them go for it, everything is more set up where we want it to be. And they have the answers inside of them. It's, kind of take myself out of the equation at that point.
And Jordyn, again, it's going back to a speech level kind of thing, right? Of getting them to think more about speaking and speaking well, and then and having the right technique even in that, but just getting them to relate to that and stop thinking about, especially with the riffs, stop thinking about singing so much and just
Yeah, exactly.
Well, and if
That's
the
a
riffs
big part.
if the riffs can also be informed by emotion. I know we keep coming back to this, but like if you're gonna all of a sudden go up really high in a riff, well then what is the reason why you're doing that? Is it because your soul is crying at that moment and all you can do is if that's all you can do, fantastic. And let's figure out a way to make that happen. And anyways, that's my whole issue.
So pertinent to this conversation, someone is asking about being dead center on the tone is not necessarily used or decried, but in teaching voice, how important is pitch to your clients?
Whoa.
Well,
Loaded question.
Depends
I'll
on
say-
what they're singing.
Yeah.
Loaded.
yes. I
Yeah.
just did. I was talking about a great singer. She's many people's favorite in the gospel and honestly R&B world everywhere. Honestly, it's Kim Burrell, and I was talking about her. Yeah, right. And I was talking about her in the video, and I usually don't tackle the greats just because I get so nervous. It's a personal thing, nothing against them. It's all me. But on my YouTube channel, I was tackling her, and I said at a certain point, we know, and I'm just speaking in general, and when I say the word person, you, like the pronoun, I said, we know you can sing. We know you can sing. I said at some point it has to come from the heart, be authentic, be real, and so I said sometimes when that real place happens, especially singing like gospel and things like that, sometimes the pitch may not be super dead center. It just happens sometimes, but sometimes that rawness can be the magic of the moment, so now I do say sing well and of course be accurate. Please be accurate. So I'm not saying let go of pitch altogether, like let's just scream. No. I want you to make sure you're singing, the right music and the right pitch, right everything, right frequency and everything. But I feel like when we have a gifted singer, that can be, it's almost, I use this word loosely, but it can be expected they can sing the right pitch. Like at a certain point, like, okay, pitch is not an issue for you. I know. So if you get a wrong pitch, it ain't like you can't sing. It's just, hey, you're human. So I
But that's
think
part of the training, right? That's part of the
Yeah.
training. Like we train to sing the right pitch, and then
exactly. And
Yep.
at some point we have to trust ourselves, say we have it. You have to trust our students, our clients, to say, okay, we talked about pitch. You're okay with pitch. That's, like trust yourself, So I think, I think there's a lot more wiggle room in others, in the current styles and the contemporary styles to have that bendable room and things like that. And it still be legitimized as like a great performance, if you will, if I could say it like that, like and I even legitimize is kind of weird to say, but you know what I'm saying, just in terms of that. So that's what I would say, if that makes sense.
Look, Jaron, what I was going to say is that what I really meant was I think we train all of our singers to sing the right pitches and to have that musicianship, but then when certain things happen in the moment, they just happen, and we're not perfect.
And it's, the ear hears the chord structure and then all of a sudden the riff is off because they're not singing the notes within the chord structure. So then all of a sudden it's like, what's going on here? So,
I also think the other thing to keep in mind, and this is like the last 20 years or so, is that the invention of auto-tune has really ruined our ears, and that we hear people on whatever, even live performances. Like I was just watching a Tiny Desk performance, and it's live from their house because of the pandemic, and I was like, but they are auto-tuned, right? And so our ears have been spoiled by, and this is including on cast recordings, right? Like, why, now that you have this ability to like make everybody sit in the pitch, why would you not do that? But then we go hear someone live and we're like, oh my gosh, that person sang 3 wrong notes. I do it to myself. I'll hear myself back in a recording, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I just sang this thing wrong. And then I have to remind myself that I'm human, and I sang 1,000 notes in that song. And if I miss one note out of 1,000, well, that's still an A, right? That's still really good. Ideally, what I want to sing into in the entire time, of course. So I do think that we've had these spoiled ears. And so, especially in talking to young singers, I try to remind them of that when they get down on themselves about like, well, this person always sings in tune. Do they? Because you're hearing the studio recording, and my fiance is a sound engineer, and I literally have sat there and watched him create perfection and magic on the computer, and that person leaves thinking that they are the best singer in the world. And gosh darn it, if we didn't know that he fixed 500 notes out of 600. So I just think that's an important thing to keep in mind too. And also, she's
Right.
a tour manager sometimes. You sang the whole thing amazing, and that engineer takes one note. Okay.
Well,
I
and
love
Jordyn, I'm gonna add in on that because I'm kind of in the world of music technology as well. And you know, auto tune, you can pretty much hear it every time, you know, but the program we use is Melodyne. And when you use Melodyne, you're surgically pulling up things, and people that do it really well, you just will never hear it. But what I try to tell my singers is you still need to have good musicianship and try to get it as close as absolutely possible. But what I want is the emotion. I want Jaron, like what you were saying, I want that rawness. I want the emotion. And so if you happen to miss a pitch slightly because you've got this incredible emotion that's going to reach somebody and really touch their heart, then let that engineer go fix it, you know, because you might not ever get that raw emotion again. And I think that internally, I think as musicians, that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to find that raw emotion.
I love this quote. David Playfair types in, I assume it's an Oleta Adams quote, God don't mind a bum note, interpretation is more important.
Great.
Goes right along with what you were just saying.
Exactly.
I want to ask, Karen Brunson typed in a question a while ago that I like. Does laryngeal flexibility include the larynx being able to move up and down, or is it more of the CTTA balance, or do they all relate?
They all relate.
Oh, did I?
They all relate. And I think, you know, if you're talking about starting, I know we had talked a little bit about mix, not a lot, but I know the word has come up a few times, and trying to work that mix and also get that laryngeal flexibility. And often we use, you know, speaking the words, speaking the phrase in our normal speech level, at volume wise, and then adding a little bit more projection, and then adding the notes, and you know, while still maintaining that speech quality. With the laryngeal flexibility exercises that I use, a lot of them I will start, for instance, on the tonic being maybe in chest register, mode 1, or in mode 2, and go up the octave. Just, I have my piano right here, so I can demonstrate that, but it's so the middle note might be a little bit more mixy, or I can choose to make the outer notes a little bit more in that mode 2. So, and I can feel my larynx lifting a little bit when I go into that belt place. I've taught myself early on to have more of a lower larynx in that, because I was singing cozy, and I had to go in and out of the classical sound and the belt sound. So mine's a little bit lower than probably my clients would be. But that would be one of my exercises. Then also doing a yodel, where I can actually feel a little bit of that movement, as well as the connectivity down at the vocal fold level, where I feel like it's coming together and the breath is changing. I mean, there's a lot that goes into that. So
Edrie, you know, oh, I'm sorry, Edrie, you know so much more than I do pedagogically, but that's the way I was taught, was with that low larynx. And I think as I started to belt, that really helped me, because then I could get that high flat sound with the larynx sitting down, the tongue sitting down. And so that's that was one thing I just noticed that, you know, really helped me as I got into the commercial styles.
Good.
Well, you guys, I could see we could talk for hours, but let's begin to wrap it up with just any final thoughts. Kelly, why don't we start with you? Any final thoughts? I know you wanted to say something about the program.
Well, I mentioned a little bit about us being in music technology. I'm at Union University now, building the commercial music department with commercial voice. I will say one thing that we have started doing, which I think goes along with what we've been talking about here, is is as far as our commercial singers. I mean, I've been in lots of different programs where they split the commercial voice from the classical. And what we've started doing here in our commercial music department is putting that student with the same teacher. And so the teacher has to be able to swap over and do both styles. But I think it's wonderful with the way they approach them with the technique. Or wait, what was it you used, Edrie? I think you used a different term and I loved it. Function. I may start using that as well. But that's one thing. So I'm right in the middle of us building that commercial music program, but we're also just started a graduate program online in music technology. And so it's probably why my brain went to the Melodyne thing and all that. But yeah, we're building that here. And but you know, it's so wonderful to hear all of these colleagues here talk about different things. I don't know about anybody else, but I feel like I've learned a few things. So thank you, Kari, so much for the invitation to be here.
Oh, my pleasure. Anyone else? Final thoughts? Something that you didn't get to share tonight that is?
I don't think I have anything I would say. Oh, sorry, Jaron. It's just that I think that as teachers, we have this fantastic opportunity to open the doors to these sounds that can be made. And also there are a lot of people, you know, on this chat, but also out there in the world that have, you know, so much insight into how we can keep broadening the understanding of what this means. And I think it's really exciting. And as a person who had to sing classically in college and kind of tricked their way through it somehow, I faced my way through classical singing, and then came out on the other side and realized that I wish I had known more. I wish I had known about the opportunities that were around. And now there are more opportunities that we just have we have this great, I'm just gonna keep saying the word opportunity, apparently, opportunity to help people find the sounds that keep them singing. And at the end of the day, that would be my biggest mission in life, is that those who want to sing can do it and do it efficiently, and that we just as teachers have this, we are put in a special position to be able to give that to people. And I wish I had had that when I was younger, and it would have really changed the course of my life. I may still have ended up right here, who knows? But anyway, that would be my final thoughts on that.
I love it. Edrie, final thought?
Oh gosh, I was hoping I had a little bit more time to think here. Everybody's saying so many wonderful things. I would say that, you know, have fun and explore the different sounds, but enjoy what you're doing when you're doing it. And, you know, and love your voice and find a teacher that will guide you, that will allow you to explore. I mean, this is so important, because if you have a teacher who is saying, no, not this way, not that way, there's only one way, you probably should go find somebody else. Now, that's not the teacher for you, because I think that we all have sounds that we make and that are organic, that we can all learn to do in a healthy way and explore those different sounds, you know, and have fun doing it. I mean, how many times have we been in the shower or, you know, just in our room and going, oh, you know, making these crazy sounds and going, whoa, that was kind of different. And I guess the last thing that I would say is a quote from a song in The King and I, actually. So Oscar Hammerstein's lyrics. When you become a teacher by your pupils, you'll be taught. And I mean, I take that with me, because I don't think we ever stop learning. You know, each person that comes in needs to be handled individually. It's not a cookie cutter. You know, we're not using the same exercises for I mean, sometimes those exercises work, but we always need to address the person, you know, and what their desire is, what they're wanting with their voice. You know, it's not about what you want their voice to sound like. It's about what they're wanting. I mean, we can help and guide them, and terminology oftentimes comes from them. So for me, I think that quote from The King and I just stands still, and you know, we keep learning until we're gone.
Thank you. Jaron, final thought.
Yeah. I'm echoing everything everybody else. I love that quote, by the way, from The King and I series. And that was that. I mean, that's how I feel like I teach. You know, the more, even when it comes down to picking repertoire, you know, like, you know, they know artists that I have no idea about, and you know, and so I think that's even beneficial there. And that's just, you know, tip of the iceberg. But my final thoughts, honestly, are, you know, just enjoying the fact that every sound, like Jordyn said, had its place. Every sound has its place, and every nuance, every little thing has its place in the world of voice science, voice teaching, vocology, if you will. And it's so great to hear so many other people, even the four of you all in this room, along with so many other teachers who are finding the benefit in finding the magic of those places that these nuances and these different stylings and different things have. And I think it just reminds us as teachers, our job is to find, you know, and I love the word function, efficiency, healthy explanation, and things like that. And after that, you know, that's essentially our job, you know, the foundation of our job, I should say. And so with that, you know, learning different terms, and I love the term function, you know, just it even broadens it up more and breaks, you know, it just lets it be even more free. And I love that term function. I may have to steal that. I want to start using that myself, but from now on. But yeah, so I think it's just I'm excited to see where this conversation can go even further, you know, and how we can even progress even more in this thought process of these styles having their place, you know, in our world.
I love that. I love that. And as you know, Jaron, NATS is really doing a lot to open those doors and progress that. So, well, I cannot thank you all enough for joining me tonight, and such a really wonderful, dynamic conversation. So thank you. And I want to thank all my guests this season. It's been a really spectacular season, and I'm so grateful for people's generosity. I also just have to briefly thank Alan Henderson, who's always behind the scenes, NATS executive director, and even on NATS chats, you don't see him, but he's back there just providing me support, and has been such a tremendous leader through the last 15 months for our organization. I'm so proud of our organization through COVID, and the way all of us have pivoted. You know, it's been really a tremendous privilege to be in this profession that, you know, should have been wiped out, and was in many ways for our performers. And yet how many people have continued to study with us and continued to grow as singers. And I think we've learned a lot about why we study, why we teach, you know, and it has been really a privilege to be a part of that this last 15 months. And of course, I have to thank Karen Michaels, who came on board this year to help me with the graphics, and has not helped me, she has done the graphics for the NATS chats, which I think has elevated it quite a bit. And then finally, of course, Scott McCoy and Inside View Press, who have continued to sponsor our webinars on the GoToWebinar. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful summer. Stay tuned for next year's lineup as I work on that over the summer, and you'll see news about that on Facebook and other places. So thank you, everyone, and be safe. Continue to be safe this summer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
See you all next fall. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.